Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to begin by continuing the theme that my colleague has picked up here, and that is to say that it looks like a random number generator has wandered its way through the pages of this SOP. So incoherent are the commencement dates of the various clauses. And to give just a few examples, Clause 7B of Clause 79B, which covers sections 74.7G and 79B 1A, 1D and small 3, come into force on 1 April 2009. Sections 74.7BAB and 82 are treated as coming into force on 6 October 2009. Sections 34B and 34C come into force on 20 May 2000. I mean, these aren't even the same dates of subsequent years. They appear to be randomly distributed. Sections 19B, 28B, 30C, 36B1 and 3, 64C, 67B, 67F, 73B and 83 all come into force on 1 October 2010. 74G, however, 1 November 2010. I mean, why single out one clause to come into force 1 month later? And as if that's not rich enough, 12B, Section 74C, 1 November 2110, and then there's a whole swag. Now, I'm going to spare members opposite the experience of reading through all the subclauses, but they start at 21B and proceed down through 51, 57, 69, 74. There's a bunch of subclauses to 74, right on through 74.5 and down to 94B. There's about 24 of those clauses which enter into force on 1 April 2013, and that's just in the head note. Just in the head note. Now, when you actually go through the bill, what is interesting is that the random number generator appears to have gone amok, because interspersed through the bill are a range of starting dates, some of which appear to be covered and others don't. So we turn to page 6, we get a 1 April 2011, flicking through subsection 2 of section CX63 on 8 is again 1 April 2011. We're running through and we're getting to clauses 34B and 34F, 20 May 2010. Over to 38B and 38D, 1 April 2011. Same on clause 10B, 1 April 2011 for 38D, 41B. And this is really interesting. In section 41G, elections to become a qualifying company, within the same section, Mr. Chairman, we have a range of different starting dates. Different commencement dates within the same section. It's hard to credit. So section 41G 1B, 3 and 5, 1 April 2011, 4 and 5 of HA5, which follows, not specified. The next clause, which is 41H, grandparenting, HA7B from the Parenting Act on grandparenting requirements, 1 April 2011. Sections HA 10, 11, 4 and 20, 1 April 2011, but in the next clause under 41J, 1 April 2010. And the point, sir, is that there is no transparent logic why these different dates would have been selected. I could go on, this is HZ4D running into page 44, 1 April 2011. And so on and so forth. And these apparently random numbers carry on through the bill. Now, there may be some logic to this. I'm sure officials have thought about it. I'm sure they've got their reasons. And, the minister's an experienced minister. I'm sure that if it was purely random, he would have noticed. But the point is it's not transparent to the House. These questions could have been asked in a select committee if it had gone to a select committee, but of course it has not. And where we are left as a parliament is having to make observations for which there may be a logical answer, but the minister seems unprepared to reply to, and thereby the public, the industry, listeners have no idea, just as the opposition has no idea, why this assortment of apparently randomly selected commencement dates have been sprinkled through the bill like confetti or hundreds and thousands. I've seen more order on a child's sandwich. Mr Chairman.
David Cunliffe.
Mr Chairman, so, that is, I think, really an example of the sort of thing that the House has been wrestling with since 9:30 this morning. This is very, very, very bad lawmaking, and that brings us, of course, to the title of the bill. I mean, it should have been called, previously, the Taxation, GST and Minor Matters Unanimously Agreed by the Select Committee Bill, because it was. And every party in this House was going to agree to it. And my colleague, Mr Mallard's... Well, my colleague thinks he's been doing a bit of late revisionism, and he's found a few hairs he wants to split, and good on him. It's great to have his laser-like focus at this stage in the proceedings. And as in any bill, Mr Mallard, of course, there are things you'd change, but you pick your targets. But suffice to say there was sufficient agreement for all colleagues around the House to feel it did more good than harm. Hello, we now get a 70-page supplementary order paper dropped on the House almost without notice, bigger than the original bill, full of very, very substantive provisions, and the consensus is destroyed. The Minister has single-handedly shot the process in the foot, and with it the parliamentary consensus that would have enjoyed. So we could call it the bad process bill. We could call it the pulling division from the jaws of unity bill. We could call it the Newton's law of holes, what ministers should always avoid bill, because he fell into that trap of keeping digging when in earlier parts of the debate confronted with the process choices he's made. And instead of saying, OK, you guys have got a point, we didn't provide it earlier and it hasn't had all the scrutiny it could have had, but it should still be passed. No, the Minister ran the following line. Well, we announced our intention in general terms in the budget. Fine. We consulted with the industry on some matters contained in the bill. Fine. We therefore didn't need to put it to a select committee. Not fine. Because by the very same logic, no tax bill would ever go to a select committee, because almost all tax matters are highlighted in the budget. And almost all tax matters have been consulted at some point with the industry. But that is exactly why we have a generic tax policy process that involves public submissions, because let's face it, many of those in the industry represent vested interests. They don't represent mum and dad Kiwi. And mum and dad Kiwi at the very least are entitled to know why this affects them. Why does it affect them? Well, here's the next possible title. This is the big bottom line bill. $2.25 billion of tax revenue at stake in the LAQC avoidance stakes, which is governed by this SOP. $2.25 billion as opposed to a total corporate tax take of only $9 billion. It's over a quarter. And yet, it was supposedly amenable to discussion by a late amendment in the committee of the whole House without public scrutiny through a select committee. That's why this should be called the Newton's law of holes, please stop digging, Minister Bill. Perhaps also it could be called the green light to avoidance bill, or at least a very soft amber light. Because while it is true, as the Minister said, that the look-through company regime is just marginally tighter than the loss attributing qualifying company regime, marginally is the operative word. Out of the $2.3 billion odd of potentially avoided tax, this recovers only $130 million for the Crown. 0.13 billion, not 2.3 billion. And so the question has to be asked, and it's probably the primary substantive question in this bill. Could the government not have done better? Could officials not have been asked to go further, to work harder, to be provided with more resourcing? That they could not have got that $130 million up at the time of the public's greatest need to something closer to a shutdown of those much maligned exemptions. Or finally, we might call this, Mr. Chairman, the weak excuse for weak law bill. The excuse that it was so urgent that we just had to bring it in before Christmas, but it wasn't urgent enough to take it to a committee a month ago. That's got to be the weakest excuse of all, given the magnitude of tax flows at stake in the substance of this bill. Well, it's at times like this that one is confronted with the age-old choice.